Imagine you're a Roman guard outside a sealed stone room in Alexandria. Inside is Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, the most powerful woman back then. She's been locked in there for a week. You can hear her sometimes, not crying or screaming, just moving around, soft steps on the stone, the quiet sound of her clothes. Now and then, she talks, like someone's in there, but you know she's alone. Before we go on, you should know this: almost everything you've heard about Cleopatra's death is probably wrong. The story about the snake in a basket of figs? Likely made up. The picture of her dying peacefully in her bed with her servants around her? Almost surely not true. What really happened in that room in August 30th BC was planned, thought out, and says a lot about how Rome took down its enemies. This isn't a story about suicide. It's about how they messed with Cleopatra's head to break her before she died. The real question is, why did Octavian need her to die in a certain way, and why did he need over a week to make it happen? If you want to understand how power works when it's controlled and planned, think about subscribing. This channel shows the methods of control that shaped old civilizations, the stuff history books leave out. Let me tell you what really happened in Cleopatra's last days. The takedown started on August 1st, 30 BC. Inside the tomb Cleopatra had built for herself, Mark Antony was dying. He'd stabbed himself with his sword because someone lied and said Cleopatra was dead. Only she wasn't. She de-locked herself inside the tomb with her two most loyal servants and as much treasure as they could carry. The tomb was near the Temple of Isis, a strong stone building with 2 floors. It had big wooden doors and no easy way in. Cleopatra built it like a fort, knowing she'd need protection in death just like she did in life. Antony was bleeding to death at the bottom of the tomb. His men begged Cleopatra to open the doors, but she said no. It was too risky. Octavian's soldiers were close. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra and her servants used ropes to pull Antony up through a high window, dragging him inside while he was still alive. His blood ran down the stone as they pulled. Think about that, the Queen of Egypt hauling her dying lover into her tomb because opening the door meant she'd be captured. Antony died in her arms on the top floor. His last words, as Plutarch wrote, were something like, "Don't feel bad for me. I was the greatest Roman, beaten only by another Roman." He died thinking his life had meant something. Cleopatra barely had time to cry before Octavian's soldiers showed up. But Octavian didn't attack the tomb. He didn't break down the doors or force his way in. Instead, he sent a messenger named Proculus. The message was simple: Caesar wanted to talk about surrender and what would happen to her children. Cleopatra wouldn't open the doors. She told Proculus through a crack in the stone that she'd only make a deal if Octavian promised her children would be safe. While they talked, Proculus's men climbed the walls. They got in through the same window they'd used to pull Antony in. They caught her off guard. Cleopatra grabbed a dagger from her clothes and tried to kill herself, but the soldiers stopped her. They took the dagger, held her down. Cassius wrote that Cleopatra screamed as they grabbed her, yelling, "You won't take me alive to Rome. You won't parade me. Kill me now." But the soldiers had their orders: keep her alive, no matter what. They carried her out of the tomb, took her to the palace, and locked her in a guarded room on the 2nd floor. That moment, August 1st, was when the real takedown began. Octavian didn't just want Cleopatra dead. He wanted something specific from her death, and that would take time. Egypt, the richest kingdom back then, was now his. But he had a problem back in Rome. He'd just won a civil war, Romans killing Romans. He needed to make it okay. He needed to turn the war into something people would accept, a war against a foreign enemy, a dangerous queen from the east who'd corrupted Mark Antony and threatened Rome itself. But Cleopatra wasn't a barbarian. She was smart, spoke many languages, and knew politics. She'd lived in Rome, spoke in Latin, met senators, and made deals with Cicero. The Romans knew she wasn't a simple character, and that was the problem. It's hard to make propaganda out of complicated enemies. Octavian needed to make her simple, to change her from a political rival into a symbol, the temptress from the east, the Egyptian witch, the foreign corruption that had to be wiped out for Rome to survive. Most of all, he needed to parade her through the streets of Rome alive during his triumph. Cleopatra knew what that parade meant, and she'd rather die than let it happen. But Octavian had over a week to make sure she didn't get her way. Octavian needed the Roman people to see the dangerous queen defeated, ashamed, broken. Roman triumphs followed a set plan. A defeated king or queen was walked through the streets of Rome and chains shown to the crowd, publicly shamed, and then at the end of the parade usually killed in the Tullianum prison. That's how Rome celebrated winning, by making its enemies feel small. Octavian's whole future depended on that show, on parading Cleopatra through Rome as proof that he'd beaten the East. But Cleopatra knew the plan. She'd seen triumphs before. She'd been in Rome in 44 BC during Caesar's triumph. She'd watched as Vercingetorix, the Gallic king, was dragged through the streets in chains and then strangled to death in the Tullianum. She knew exactly what Octavian wanted to do to her. So, two strong wills against each other, with over a week to decide who would win. Here's how Octavian went about it. The room where Cleopatra was held was picked carefully, second floor of the palace, one door, one small window too tiny to climb through, guards outside all the time. They took away anything she could use to hurt herself, no knives, no daggers, no ropes, no sharp things. Plutarch wrote that they even searched her clothes and hair every day, looking for hidden weapons or poison. Cleopatra was left with nothing but basic clothes in an empty stone room. But Octavian was doing more than just keeping her locked up. He didn't just want to stop her from dying, he wanted to kill her desire to die. Think about the psychology of it. Cleopatra wanted death because death meant she had worth. Death meant control. Death meant Octavian could never parade her through Rome. Octavian had to turn that around. He had to make her want to live, and to do that, he used what she couldn't give up, her children. Cleopatra had 4 kids. Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, was 17. Then there were the twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, who were both 10, and the youngest, Ptolemy, was only 6. Those 3 were Mark Antony's. Octavian's men took them away from their mother right away, moved them to different parts of the palace, and kept them under guard. On August 2nd, the day after Cleopatra was captured, Octavian sent another messenger, not Proculus this time, but Cornelius Gallus, a poet, soldier, and diplomat. His message was clear, controlled, and cruelly phrased. Caesar wants you to know that your children are being taken care of. What happens to them depends on how well you cooperate. If anything happens to you, Caesar can't promise they'll be safe. Caesarion, in particular, is in a risky place. Cleopatra got it right away. Caesarion was Julius Caesar's son. That alone made him dangerous to Octavian, who claimed to be Caesar's adopted son. If Cleopatra died, Caesarion would have no one to protect him. He'd be killed. But if Cleopatra lived, if she did what they wanted, if she let them use her, then maybe Caesarion would live. Maybe all her kids would. That was the trap. Octavian gave Cleopatra a reason to live that went against her reason to die. Her pride said she should die. Her children said she should live. For over a week, Cleopatra was stuck inside that impossible choice, caught between her pride and her love for her children. On August 3rd, the pressure went up. Octavian sent builders to her room. They came with measuring tools, ropes, and wax tablets to take notes. They measured her height, her weight, the size of her body. Plutarch, quoting one of Cleopatra's surviving servants, said that the queen asked what they were doing. Preparing for Caesar's triumph, one of the builders replied. The display needs to be built right to hold you. Think about the effect of that moment. They were measuring her like an object, like a piece of furniture, like something to be put into a structure. They weren't just taking measurements, they were sending a message. This is happening. You are going to Rome. We're building the cage now. And they came back the next day, August 4th, then August 5th, then August 6th. Each day more measurements, more questions. What clothes would she wear? What jewelry would Roman people recognize? Would she be in chains or just tied up? They talked about it in front of her, going over the details, the presentation, the look of it all. They talked about her shame as if it was a work of art. This wasn't planning, it was getting her ready. Every day the builders came back. Death looked better and better. But every day, Octavian balanced that with news about her children. Caesarion asked about you today. He's worried. He needs his mother. Pull her toward death with the horror of the triumph, pull her back toward life with worry for her children, and trap her in between. Cleopatra was alone in that room. Her two servants who'd been with her in the tomb, Iras and Charmian, were kept in different rooms. She could hear them sometimes, their voices barely reaching her through the stone, but she wasn't allowed to talk to them, no one to talk to, no one to plan with, no one to share the weight of the awful choice she had to make. Cassius Dio said that Cleopatra kept asking to see her children, but they always said no. Not until Caesar is sure you'll cooperate. But she could hear them. The palace walls were stone, and sound carried easily. Sometimes she heard the younger children playing, their laughter floating through the tiny window. Think about that torture, hearing your children close by, knowing they're close enough to hear but not close enough to touch, not knowing if the sounds are real or staged, not knowing if they're safe or if it's all part of the trick. Modern psychology calls this learned helplessness. Strip someone of their power, take away their choices, make them rely on their captor for even the smallest bit of news about the people they love. Octavian was doing that perfectly. By August 7th, Plutarch wrote, Cleopatra stopped eating. When the guards brought food, she wouldn't take it. She sat in the room, quiet, staring at the stone walls. The guards told Octavian right away. Octavian didn't try to make her eat. Instead, he brought Caesarion. For the first time in over a week, Cleopatra saw her oldest son. The meeting didn't last long. Guards stood close the whole time, but Plutarch wrote down what Caesarion said to his mother, please eat. Please take care of yourself. I need you. We all need you. Then the guards took him away. That night, Cleopatra ate. And that tells you everything. The threat to her children wasn't just an idea anymore, it had a face, a voice, a plea. How do you choose death when your son is begging you to live? On August 8th, Octavian came himself. It was the first time he'd spoken to Cleopatra since she'd been captured. He came alone, except for the guards outside the door. We don't know everything they said, but parts of it have survived from Plutarch, who talked to people who were there, from Cassius Dio, who read Roman records, from Strabo, who was in Alexandria soon after it happened. The offer was simple: take part in the triumph willingly. Walk through Rome on your own 2 feet, not in chains. Keep some worth in defeat. In exchange, your children live, all of them, even Caesarion. They'll be raised in Rome as wards of the state, educated, protected, given good futures. But Caesarion dies the day you die. The younger ones might live, they might not. No promises made. Cleopatra asked for time to think. Octavian gave her 3 days. After that, we sail for Rome whether you agree or not. The choice is yours. That's how clever the trap was. Octavian wasn't offering a way out, he was offering a justification, a way for Cleopatra to tell herself that being shamed was worth it, that giving up was not weakness but a sacrifice for her children. It was a lie. Octavian was never going to let Caesarion live. The boy was too dangerous. But Cleopatra didn't know that yet. For 3 days, she lived between hope and despair. Then, on August 11th, 30 BC, something changed. We don't know exactly what happened. The stories we have are not clear, but something made Cleopatra see the truth. Maybe she overheard a guard talking. Maybe someone loyal to her got a message to her. Maybe she just knew Octavian well enough to see through his act. However it happened, by August 11th, Cleopatra knew Caesarion was going to die. The negotiations were a show. The promises meant nothing. Doing what they wanted wouldn't change a thing. Octavian was going to kill her son no matter what she chose. Plutarch wrote that Cleopatra then asked to visit Antony's tomb. She said she wanted to pray there before going to Rome. It was a fair request, and Octavian let her go. She was taken to the tomb with a lot of guards, allowed inside for an hour. The soldiers watched her pray, watched her pour drinks over the place where Antony had died. They didn't see her hide a small clay bottle in the wall, or slip something into her clothes. When she got back to her room, Cleopatra asked for a meal. She asked for fresh figs from the market. The guards looked through the basket carefully. They looked for hidden weapons, poison, anything dangerous. They saw only fruit, so they let it through. This is where the story of the snake comes in. The popular version says Cleopatra hid an asp, an Egyptian cobra, inside the basket of figs. It's dramatic and symbolic. The cobra was the sign of Egyptian royalty, but some old historians, including Strabo, didn't think that was right. The story doesn't fit the timeline. The symptoms people wrote down don't match cobra bites, and snakes aren't a very reliable way to commit suicide. What makes more sense based on what we know is that Cleopatra had gotten poison earlier. That she'd hidden it in Antony's tomb when she was locked in there, and that she took it back when she went to visit. What happened next would end the days, and decide whether Cleopatra died broken or in control. How she did it matters less than what happened next. August 12th, 30 BC. Early in the morning, the guards outside Cleopatra's room heard nothing unusual, no screams, no fighting, just silence. Around 9 a.m., they opened the door to bring her breakfast. Cleopatra was dead. She was lying on a golden couch wearing royal clothes. Her 2 servants were with her. Iras was already dead at the foot of the couch. Charmian was still alive, using her last bit of strength to straighten the crown on Cleopatra's head. Plutarch wrote that one of the guards asked her, "Was this well done?" Charmian replied, "Extremely well, fitting for a descendant of so many kings." Then she died. Cleopatra was 39 years old. This wasn't a suicide out of despair. It was a final act of control. For over a week, Octavian had tried to break her, tried to make her choose life so he could parade her through Rome, tried to use her love for her children to make her give up her worth. Her death was her saying no, her final message: "You can take my kingdom. You can destroy my family. But you can't take my choice. You can't parade me. You can't have that triumph." She died on her own terms, dressed as a queen, surrounded by the symbols of power that Octavian had worked so hard to take away. But here's the final cruel part: Octavian won anyway. He couldn't parade the real Cleopatra, so he built a fake one, a statue, an image. During his triumph in Rome, a huge image of Cleopatra with a snake on her arm was carried through the streets. The Roman crowd saw Cleopatra in Octavian's triumph, saw her beaten, saw her brought down to the image he wanted them to remember. The propaganda worked. The story of Cleopatra as the exotic Egyptian temptress who died by a snake bite became the story that lasted for 2,000 years. And Caesarion, the child Cleopatra died believing she might save, was killed 3 weeks later. Octavian sent men to find him as he ran toward India. Julius Caesar's only son, just 17 years old, was killed on the road in the Egyptian desert. The younger children lived. They were paraded in Octavian's triumph instead of their mother, raised in Rome by Octavian's sister, watched closely, given limited futures, never allowed to go back to Egypt. Cleopatra died believing her sacrifice might protect them, believing that choosing how she died was a sign of pride. In the end, Octavian got everything he wanted: the propaganda victory, the removal of his rivals, the conquest of Egypt, control of the story. Cleopatra's death only bought her the way she died. Those days show how power works when it's planned out. Octavian didn't just want to beat Cleopatra, he wanted to crush her mind first, to use her love for her children against her will to die with dignity. To create an impossible choice, pride her children, and force her to live inside it, to measure her for shame, to show her what was waiting for her in Rome, to offer false hope that doing what he wanted might save what mattered most. It was a machine, every part planned, every weakness found, every moment meant to take away her power until giving up seemed right. And when it didn't work, when Cleopatra chose death anyway, Octavian just paraded an image instead. That's real power, not the ability to kill, but the ability to control the story, even when your enemy says no. If this showed you something disturbing about how power worked back then, how beating enemies wasn't enough, they had to be broken first, subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll keep looking at how planned takedowns shaped the old world. Leave a comment and tell me what you think. Was Cleopatra's final choice a victory, a defeat, or both? Stand in Alexandria today. The tomb where Cleopatra died is gone. The palace where she spent her last days lies underwater, lost to earthquakes in time. All that's left are the stories and the question: she chose death over shame, yet her image was paraded anyway. She died to protect her children, yet Caesarion was killed. She controlled how she died, but not the story that followed. Those days between August 1st and August 12th show something important about power and control. Sometimes the only choice left is how you lose. Sometimes pride costs everything and buys nothing, except knowing that the choice was still yours. Cleopatra died a queen, alone in a sealed stone room with only her 2 loyal servants. She couldn't save her kingdom and couldn't save her children, but she did stop Octavian from getting the joy of parading her living body through Rome. Whether that was enough, whether it mattered, is the question that echoes across 2,000 years. Remember those days. Remember what Octavian built, a psychological machine meant to break the last pharaoh of Egypt before her death. Remember how close it came to working. And remember why Cleopatra chose death anyway, not because it saved anything, but because it was the one choice Octavian couldn't take from her. That's what her final days were, not romance, not legend, just the planned destruction of her power and one woman's refusal to let it be complete.